Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The governor's Medicaid expansion, the state of the city, and more tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by Jackson Baker from the Memphis Flyer. Thanks for being here. Sure. Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for being here. And Don Wade, also from the Memphis Daily News. We start with the Medicaid expansion, and I'll start with you, Jackson, and we'll try to, there's a lot of politics, obviously. It's a huge issue. We'll try to walk through some of the basics first. Let me start there, and then we'll get into some of what's going on. Obviously, this builds towards the governor's speech. He has put a lot behind this. He wants a focus next week, and it may go on for a while, just on this Medicaid expansion called Insure Tennessee. But from the governor, I think this from the governor's point of view, we're talking about an expansion into a pool of potentially 400,000 people who
280,000.
280, excuse me, thank you.
Additional ones. Yeah.
Additional people who fall between TennCare or Medicaid, the existing kind of plan, and private insurance, and to fill that gap. It is a part of Obamacare. No one wants to say that, but the Obamacare plan puts federal money through 2020 to cover 100% of this. The governor's come forward with a plan that says, well, we'll have vouchers, we'll help people get into private insurance, but it's the federal money. And then a guarantee from the hospitals and the Hospital Association that as that federal money goes down, they'll fill the gap.
Exactly.
Fair enough. And we'll get some more numbers. What's going to happen next week, do you think?
Well, the governor is going to war, and he's going to war without his entire army behind him, because he, of course, is the titular head of the Republican Party in Tennessee, and the Republican Party in general has been resisting anything and everything associated with Obamacare, or as it is called officially, the Affordable Care Act. He has been able to enlist Gerald McCormick, who's the majority leader of the House, a former Memphian who's now in Chattanooga. And that's a plus, but he couldn't get Mark Norris, who is from Shelby County and is the majority leader in the Senate, to go along. Mark Norris is probably going to line up in the opposition. The two speakers, Ron Ramsey and Beth Harwell, are just biding their time. They're not committing themselves. So it's very tense. The governor has called for Democrats to support him, and it gives them stature they have not had in a long time.
Right.
They're on the margin of the vote.
And as we joke, probably too much. I mean, they're only 5 out of 33 senators. Is that right?
Five out of 33 and 26 out of 99 in the House.
But he's going to need all that. And he's been in Memphis a number of times over the past weeks, months, as recently as I think
last week.
Last week. Excuse me. Lobbying the hospital associations here and lobbying the local delegation. Your thoughts, Bill?
Jackson brings up a good point, and it's another crucial question in the equation. Will he get all of the Democratic support? Antonio Parkinson, who's a Democratic legislator from here in Memphis, says he probably will not, and he should not count on unanimous Democratic support in the General Assembly, because he said some of his Democratic brethren in the legislature from rural West Tennessee are hearing a lot from their constituents who don't want anything to do with Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, and who he believes will vote against Insure Tennessee.
And you've got, again, in terms of the local delegation, you've got Brian Kelsey, who famously, handed the book to Kathleen Sebelius, Websites for Dummies, a year ago, around this time, year plus ago, when the healthcare.gov wasn't working. So there's just this institutional hatred for anything associated with Obamacare. The governor, in talking points and in trying to lobby support, talks about it's a pro-jobs, it's going to create some 15,000 jobs, it's going to be $1 billion in healthcare revenues, it's $909 million in new taxes. They talk about it more as, the last thing they seem to talk about is the fact that it's going to help the uninsured, or that it's going to be a kind of social program, right? That's the way he needs to position this.
Yeah, you mentioned Kelsey. He as chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, he had hearings last week, which were a circus, because the only witnesses he called were adamant opponents of Insure Tennessee. In fact, Doug Overby, a member of his committee, who is the Senate sponsor, and there are still a few moderate Republicans left. He's one of them. He took issue with Kelsey, and they turned into a fist fight between those two. But what is really happening here politically is that in the absence of a viable Democratic Party, that which I thought would happen a long time ago is beginning to occur. That is, the Republican Party is spreading out into a left, a right, and a moderate center, as the Democratic Party used to do when it was the dominant party in Tennessee. And that's what we're going to see in this coming week.
Let me keep touching back to numbers because again, some of the impact that is at stake. Whatever you think of the politics, whatever you think of the policies, or you think Obamacare smells bad or something. What they're talking about, I mean, the local hospital systems are very much in favor of this, and they've lobbied obviously heavily to get this done because the uninsured patients just in Shelby County every year, $250 million annually, Bill.
They're putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, well, that's what they cover, and what happens is the dynamic is that if I go to the Med or I go to the Methodist or Baptist or whatever and I have insurance, basically I'm taking over some of that cost. Those 250 million people that are being treated, $250 million worth of treatment that goes to the uninsured. So for the hospitals, they're saying, look, you can try to step away from the politics, try to step away from the fact you don't like Obamacare. We're paying for these people already, and we're walking away from federal money that could help.
And that's the other element of this whole discussion. The Tennessee Hospital Association is a very powerful lobbying group in Nashville, not just on this particular issue. And the other factor that comes into play is that some of the rural safety net hospitals in those areas where you might have Democrats but conservative Democrats, some of those rural safety net publicly owned hospitals are not doing well already.
Yeah.
So there's going to be considerable pressure on both parties, and I think what this is going to come down to is are those who back Insure Tennessee willing to mobilize and come together in some organized way for this. It's not enough to say, well, we have a Democratic president and this is reality and get used to it. That's not going to carry the day in Nashville.
There was a citizen group, there was a press release, at least this week, with the names of scores of Republicans who are influential in their communities across the state doing exactly what you're talking about, saying we want to see Insure Tennessee. Now, whether that cuts ice with the legislature, we'll see, but there has been such a thing.
All right, we move on to and we'll be covering this again, Medicaid, as it goes along, but let's move on now to the state of the city. And I'll start with you, Bill. No, this is Mayor Wharton's annual State of the City, around the State of the Address, the State of the Union type of deal. But we can talk about what he emphasized, the successes, but there's unmistakably, it's against the backdrop of this being an election year.
Absolutely. In any State of the City address, no matter who is mayor, they talk about their accomplishments in the last year. They inevitably talk about the city's financial condition, and they talk about their plans for the coming year. 2015 is an election year at City Hall. The city mayor's office is on the ballot, and the mayor has opposition. He not only has challengers, he has challengers who are on the Memphis City Council, which means that at least in that realm, the question is whether people outside of City Hall care about it. But within that realm, there's a lot of discussion about very specific things. Who was for what? Who was against what? Who tried to be on both sides of the fence, which frequently happens.
Politicians would never do that. That's impossible.
Of course
that did not happen.
What was I thinking?
Yes, right. And what they're doing, Jackson, I mean, the mayor makes a case on a couple of key points as I sort of interpret the state of the city. The investments and the projects from Overton Square, and he did it, of course, in Overton Square, from Bass Pro, which is about to open, which, IKEA, these projects that are sometimes controversial because they own public money. They put out, I think the number is that, the city's put up $26 million to get $776 million worth of private investment. You can play with these numbers, but there's been a lot of private investment. There's been a lot of public investment in some big projects. They talked about a blight initiative. They talk about a crime initiative. They talk about a new minority business division. What am I missing in terms of kind of the points that Wharton is emphasizing, and where do his opponents seem being weak?
And he talked about a fair amount about public safety and how he was we're going to have a stronger police force and so forth. The police force is below par still.
In terms of its numbers?
Yeah,
Right.
And a lot of the policemen are still sore about what happened to them benefits-wise and pension-wise. And that's one reason why it's been below strength. But he talked about all these projects that basically involve a whole lot of leverage, and which he was bragging about, but that's also a difficult point. We may see the state comptroller looking over his shoulder again. And Bill mentioned the fact that people are on two sides of the issue. Jim Strickland, the city councilman who's very budget conscious and has been running for mayor for years, finally made it formal.
Yeah.
He had a press conference after the speech, and he pointed out that the mayor did not support the Overton Square development project as he and Shay
Right.
Flynn proposed it. And he's taking credit for things that he didn't do.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, do politicians ever do that?
Yeah, I know it's kind of hard. I mean, I know it's important, and I shouldn't laugh, but it's hard not to laugh.
I was more struck. The thing that I walked away was that the mayor made a pretty vocal defense of his long-range approaches, in particular to the issue of violent crime in Memphis. Things that regard violent crime as a health issue, which the mayor has for
Right.
quite some time made that connection between the two. And that to me was notable because those programs take time, and they are the types of initiatives that
Right.
people tend to get impatient with
Yeah.
when they see a spike in homicides, as we saw in 2014.
Yeah.
So he was willing to invest some political capital in that, and he will almost certainly take fire from challengers who will say, to hell with the long-range approach, we need help now,
Right,
and the mayor
right.
should be focused on that and leave that for someone else.
Well, and does the incident Kroger, come into play? You mentioned the uptick in the violent crime. The police department is not happy with the administration given the cuts in benefits and short and long term. I mean, how much does that? Are they just going to beat them up with that, Jax?
Oh, sure. I seem to recall that back after the second of those incidents, there was the Kroger incident, then there was one at Central High School after a football game. And they were coming with relative regularity, and people were very concerned about it. The mayor at that point announced that he would have a comprehensive proposal by the end of the year. Now, I may have missed something, but I have not seen the comprehensive proposal.
Well, that's going to be the beef from the challengers,
Yeah.
is that the administration starts things, announces things, and then does not finish them. In the case of the quote-unquote mob attack on the Kroger parking lot, the first thing that the mayor said the day after that attack was, we don't want to hear that the parents need programs or we need programs for these children. The parents should take responsibility for it. Since then, the response from the mayor's office has consisted almost entirely of programs for parents, parenting centers, the very things that
Yeah.
the mayor initially rejected on this.
Who is declared at this point running for mayor? We have Jim Strickland.
Jim Strickland, Harold Collins, another councilman, has appointed an exploratory committee. Hasn't named yet, hasn't declared yet.
James Harvey.
James Harvey's declared a
Formerly
long time
of-
ago.
yeah,
Yeah. Mike Williams, the police association leader.
It's
may
made
run.
noise? Okay,
may
made noise
run.
about it. Okay.
He's talking to crowds. He's doing a pretty good job.
Yeah.
by the way.
Other.
Detrick Golden, who is a former University of Memphis basketball player,
Right.
has been not only new to politics, he's been exploring specifically running for this office for at least a year and a half.
Justin Ford, the county commission chairman, has been telling us on February the 9th he will tell us one thing or the other.
What he'll do.
Yeah, I think he'll run.
Yeah.
Because he's got nothing to lose.
But
in
at this
doing
point,
so.
so we'll go there. We'll obviously be following that through the year. An issue, moving on to the fairgrounds, we had some folks from the issue on the show, I believe it was last week. It's clearly a growing issue. There was a forum this week, Bill, you were there. And there's a lot of opposition, a public forum. What was the nature of that opposition?
The nature of the opposition was kind of two camps, and at some points they blended into one. You have a dedicated group of people who want to save the Coliseum. They do not want the Coliseum demolished to make way for the multi-purpose arena, which is part of these very tentative plans that the administration has for the fairgrounds as an amateur athletic tournament facility. Then you have people who may or may not want the Coliseum preserved, but who think that this is an incomplete plan, that the mayor and his administration are wrong when they say, let's go for the tourism development zone that would finance this and then come up with private developers and a more specific plan for it. They want to see the specific plan now and think that should be up front before you start carving out sales tax revenue to finance this project.
Yeah, and let's bring you in, Don. We were talking a little bit before the show. You were joking, having spent a lot of time out at the First Tennessee Fields. This whole concept of the youth sports as a business, as an attraction. Your thoughts on the shape of the proposal as it is right now?
Well, if you look at what's out there now with First Tennessee, the baseball complex in South Haven that was around before First Tennessee, and even the Mike Rose soccer complex, all these teams and these parents, they've kind of got their routine. They're used to coming to certain places. They know what they're going to get. There are plenty of hotels and restaurants nearby. It's convenient, and there's a price point that works, and there's a price point that doesn't work. So if you start something new on the fairgrounds for baseball or soccer, you're going to have to be competitive with what's out there, or you're not going to be very relevant.
Right. And, Kevin Kane made the point last week on the show, that those things will continue to be successful, and there was just an untapped market. There's just these millions, billions nationally of money that you can bring in. There's a big gaping hole in the middle of Memphis for locals, and I say this as someone who lives, in Midtown. Driving out to Mike Rose Soccer is just a miserable experience. It's a great facility. It's not that. It's just that drive. And so there's certainly pent-up demand for getting the money and the politics and all that within Midtown and downtown probably for something that's closer. But it does seem to rely on, can you attract enough people from out of town? Can you get these big traveling tournaments and get the people to sleep and get the people to go to the restaurants and so on?
And one of the linchpins of this thing is supposed to be the retail component.
Right.
They want some serious big box retailers in there, and it's Taylor Berger, who's one of the major opponents, the local businessman, says, look, Fairview is on one prime part of the site, the Kroc Center is on another. Where are you going to hide the retail that you're trying to attack?
Right. And then they have, I guess, come out and said there'd be no. We talked about this. No restaurants because they don't want to compete with the Overton, the Cooper Young folks and the Overton Square folks. But it just seems that the gray area, what the administration said, and I think what Wharton said when he was on the show in December, is look, we have a concept of a plan, we need to get the TDZ in place, and then we'll start naming private people and we'll put RFPs out and we'll begin to really bring definition to it. And that seems a perfectly sensible approach to him, but there's so much wariness among people about, well, have you done the numbers? Are we going to end up with an albatross? Is it going to be like the Pyramid versus FedEx Forum? Somebody criticized me on social media after last week because Kevin Kane pointed to how the Cannon Center replaced Ellis Auditorium and it was controversial, but now we have this great Cannon Center, which it is a fantastic place, but it was hugely expensive and there were cost overruns and so on. And so all these fears, I think, push up, Bill, against the kind of the skeleton that the administration has put forward.
Right. The issue with the Cannon Center and the person who had those comments had a point. The whole wariness here deals with how we execute projects, not what happens after we have them. There's a more recent example than the Cannon Center. It's Beale Street Landing,
right.
which I think few people quarrel with. It's a nice place to go, but it was hugely over budget by $43 million,
right.
and it took entirely too long
right.
to complete the project.
Right. One last thought on this.
Yeah, and some of these albatrosses, as people call them, actually end up with good wings and fly. We had a discussion on this show not too long ago about how the parking garage at Overton Square was being ignored. It fills up every seat, every place now.
Right. I mean, and the administration, you go back to these things are ugly to watch, and the politics are difficult, but some of the things are pretty amazing that come out the other end. And so it will continue to be a big fight on the fairgrounds. I mean, because clearly there's just a lot of questions out there that people have. We'll move on, Bill. The school settlement, it was kind of not even necessarily a top headline because the city council approved the settlement with the schools and all is peace and over in terms of the ongoing feud.
Right. Shelby County Schools Board approved it on a 7-0 vote. It would have been 9-0, except for you had two members who had some ties to city government in their businesses, what they do for a living, so they recused themselves on it. So now Dorsey Hobson, who is the superintendent of the school system, he awaits the first payment in this, which is $8 million, which is due from the city in just a few weeks. He wants the school board to use that money and the other money that comes as a result of this $28 million in cash for an expansion of the innovation zone schools that the school system has. Might add that the Mayor Wharton, in his State of the City address, said that he hopes that the settlement money will be used by the school system for a further expansion of pre-kindergarten. So a bit of a difference there, but ultimately the Shelby County Schools Board determines how this money
I was going
is
to say,
used.
because there's no strings attached on it in that sense.
No.
And so, and we have talked about this off and on. It was originally, people argue about the number, but something like $58 million that was out there. Kenneth Whalen's been on the show. All this, it seems to have, there was some, again, we talk about the politics, Jackson. Mayor Wharton and Dorsey Hobson get together, they negotiate a settlement. He doesn't talk to the city council about it. They get kind of rubbed the wrong way by that. But what they finally approved is pretty much what Mayor Wharton negotiated.
Yeah, there's
right?
a little face saving between the mayor's announcement and the final approval, in which the mediation committee did meet a couple more times, and they put their hand in on it.
Yeah.
Well, it is the same in terms of a big payment on the front and then parsed out over years and then credits after that. But the cash part of it is pretty significantly smaller than what the mayor's proposed settlement was, which the council neither voted up nor down. They simply ignored it and went back to mediation.
I got you. Okay. We'll leave that there and move on to our last story, Don, which is the Grizzlies. Kind of mid-season, basically the All-Star break coming up. Marc Gasol, first Grizzly ever to be voted in. Some other folks have been there, coaches' picks, as they call it. But this time, fans voted Marc Gasol in. And the team is ranked at this, as we tape this, they're number 3 in the whole NBA. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, they would be the second seed in the Western Conference if the playoffs started today. And not only did Mark get voted in to start, but Mike Conley and Zach Randolph were certainly in the conversation when the coaches made their picks. They made a bold move earlier in January, trading with the Boston Celtics to acquire Jeff Green, who Dave Yeager has inserted into the starting lineup. From all appearances, they are structured in such a way, and they are positioned currently in such a way to make the best run in the postseason that they ever have.
Yeah, and they're getting national attention now, which they didn't get, NBA.com, ESPN, all these places they were on the NBA TV. If you're, I'm revealing that I'm an NBA fan. They haven't gotten that sort of attention. Even in some of the other playoff runs, it does seem like now they're getting a different level of attention, a different level of respect. Because they're not the kind of young up-and-coming team anymore. They're kind of a veteran team.
Yeah, and the best part of that, Eric, is that the way they have handled it, I think. They're on a 5-game winning streak right now, and the culture of that locker room is driven first by Marc Gasol and Mike Conley, and they are very much team-first guys, and that hasn't changed just because some attention has come their way.
Yeah. Jackson, you're going to say something?
Well, they haven't. Some of the national media haven't quite caught up with this phenomenon. I've been waiting for a year or so, 2 years, for Mike Lupica on the Sports Reporters to acknowledge there is something called the Memphis Grizzlies. And he's passed up every opportunity to do it so far.
Yeah.
He'll talk about losing teams like the Knicks and the Lakers because they're on the coast where they have big audiences. And you see the promos for NBA gear, and they show all kinds of jerseys. I haven't seen the Grizzlies jersey yet. If the Grizzlies finish this season as successfully as we hope they might, I think you'll see that begin to happen next year. Just like Green Bay is a little old town in Wisconsin, but it's a big sports capital. We can be that too.
Yeah, and I think the Forbes number came out. Forbes, which ranks all they kind of guess at the value of or estimate the value of the various sports franchises. I think what they put on the Grizzlies, $750 million. I mean, I think it was sold to the current ownership in the 300-400 range. I mean, it's shown that these small market teams, which was 10, 12 years ago when they were talking about bringing the Grizzlies, people said, oh, it's too small market. So far, I mean, now they're doing pretty well financially, and the value of the franchise is growing. And it's hard not to talk about without segueing into, it's in sharp contrast, Don, to the Tigers. Tigers basketball is just in a dark period.
It is in a dark period, and I'm from Kansas City, as you know, and the Royals and Chiefs were never great at the same time. And we've got a little bit of that here. And if you go to FedEx Forum for a Grizzlies game and if you go for a Tigers game, the crowds are very different. I lower the average age of attendance when I go to a Tigers game. That's not a good thing for them. And it's just a different experience. And there is some fatigue among Tiger fans who felt like, despite the 4 straight NCAA tournament appearances, all those Joe Jackson teams, they felt like they should have gone deeper. That didn't happen. Josh Pastner didn't make a Sweet 16. So now he's kind of paying for that with this team that's probably not even going to make the tournament, and there's some unrest.
But they've got, I mean, they haven't, I think there's a way in which people, and maybe I'm doing it, or certainly sports radio does it, that the sky is falling and Tiger basketball, teams have bad years.
Sure.
Right? I mean, certain
Sure.
teams don't. I mean, Duke doesn't. I mean, certain teams don't. But even North Carolina, with the coach right now, has had some really bad years. With all these players leaving and the way recruiting works now, I suppose there's a voice that should say, hey, it's just a bad year, and he's got a great recruiting class coming in, and we shouldn't just, lament the end of Tiger basketball.
Right. I think two things, and I think I can say this because I'm not originally from Memphis. I think Memphis fans are one of those fan bases that misjudges where their program is historically a little bit. A lot of them think they are in the same sentence with Kentucky and North Carolina and
Right.
Duke, and that's just not true.
Yeah.
So that's unreasonable.
Right.
But the other part of it,
You have a guard waiting for you to go out, right? About that. The studio,
Yeah,
having
that's
just
right.
said that,
That's
I
right.
just want to make sure you're on your
But
own.
yeah, programs do have down years, but recruits, I think, have consistently been overhyped, if you will. But yet, it's the coach's responsibility to get the most out of the recruits. So it's kind of,
Yeah.
where do you want to put the line?
You want, Jackson?
Yeah, I was thinking that you on these sports radio talk shows, you hear a lot of complaints these days. Passengers taking people out as soon as they make a mistake. People
Right.
can't develop that. That's what Calipari does in Kentucky.
Right, yeah.
He's got a starting base of about 8 people. One makes a mistake, he's out.
15 seconds or so left here. Is there any other movement behind the scenes on conference realignment? People talk about the Big 12.
That is a pipe dream that Memphis is going to go to the Big 12 anytime soon.
Okay. All right. Well, you get the final word today. That's all the time we have. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week. Good night.